Alright, now that I ranted about a bad movie, let's talk about an actual, somewhat good movie. Now, let me be honest. I'm a little bit mixed about this one. Now, before you crucify me, now let me make this very clear. I don't think this is a bad movie by any means. I just feel like a sequel to Inside Out just isn't warranted. It just isn't needed. I feel like there is a lot you can do to expand on the first movie, and true to, kind of what I was hoping for, they did expand on it. Just not in the ways that I would have hoped, I guess I could say. Now, I don't want to make this a super long review or anything, because there is quite a bit that I actually want to talk about, and I actually have something to talk about with this one. So, let me just first start off by just listing off the positives, first starting off with the character Anxiety. Now, this character I actually did really like, specifically the actress that played her, Maya Hawke. She did a phenomenal job, in my opinion. She did a fantastic, job just demonstrating how anxiety could just impact a person. Specifically near the end, Riley has a panic attack, and sure, it's not as emotionally, I guess you could say, heavy as the first film with its ending, but since I've also in the past struggled with panic attacks, it did resonate with me in some type of way. And credit where credit is due, Maya Hawke as Anxiety does a fantastic job. But I couldn't help but also just feel like anxiety is just another version of fear. So I feel like we've all had anxiety even at a younger age. So it's kind of odd that, even in the parents' heads, if you introduce all these other emotions, it's kind of weird how in the first movie, even the parents had all these emotions, but then just randomly in the end, anxiety pops up just randomly as a gag. Oh yeah, the parents have anxiety. I get what they're trying to go for, oh yeah, they have anxiety, but just not as prominent. I just feel like if you're gonna introduce characters, maybe stick with them a little bit more, or just go for more complex, especially since, Riley is getting older and, her emotions are getting a bit more complex. But then that brings me up to, another interesting idea that the film does, which is its belief system. Now, it is visually stunning. The belief system that Riley has in this film, it's really good. I like how they don't make it it's kind of a belief on who Riley is. I really like that idea, and that's ultimately the MacGuffin this time around. Instead of 5 core memories they're trying to retrieve, they're trying to get the old, belief that Riley had before anxiety took over, and is creating a new belief system for Riley. The other thing I kind of just found odd with this is the fact that the entire movie takes place within a span of a couple of days at a summer camp, at a hockey summer camp. I don't know. I feel like if you're gonna do a sequel, you can set it during the summer. A summer camp isn't a bad idea. I just feel like, especially since Riley reaches that age, you could have done a more mature high school, maybe more mature middle school, high school type of situation. And that's probably my biggest issue with the film, is the fact that it doesn't go in too deep. I remember reading up online, they had the emotions shame and guilt kind of show up as concepts, but they thought it was too emotionally too distressing, I guess you could say, for the kids. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I feel like the target audience, yeah, you're trying to attract kids, but most of the people that watched Inside Out, myself included, are basically grown up. And I also feel like Pixar, you got to get back into the more deeper meanings. I like my mean-spirited Disney, where it's not afraid to get into the more darker, mature, especially when it comes to this type of stuff, especially with Inside Out, because like I said before, there is a lot you can do with an Inside Out sequel. And unfortunately, they just don't do a whole lot one of the other emotions that just randomly, it's not even an emotion. Like it's just a sight gag that happens like once in the beginning, once at the end, and that's it. And it's the character nostalgia. That could have been a decent character they could have thrown in, because all other aspects of Riley's life, like her old friend from Minnesota, I'm pretty sure, she's nowhere to be, like, I mean, she's barely even referenced. And, I get it, like, friends move on and everything, but I don't know, just like a nice little connection to Minnesota would have been nice, just to kind of, like, make it seem like, especially with nostalgia, especially at that age, you're gonna get, like, moments of, like, hey, I remember when I used to do this. Like, they could have done something like that. The other issues I have with the other emotions, they are here, but they're not given a whole lot to do. Like, I would say the biggest emotion that's even remotely given any type of development is embarrassment. Now, I could be mistaken, and all the other emotions went through some type of growth that I somehow missed in the movie, because granted, I only watched it once, and it was like way back in June. But I just feel like they were just there listening to anxiety. They didn't really play a role into Riley's journey that much. Like, they just kind of showed up for, like, moments. Like, embarrassment, obviously, Riley's getting embarrassed a little bit. Envy's kind of like a big drive as well, but there's never like a moment where I feel like they get developed a whole lot. They just kind of are there as new emotions, and that's really about it. But they're not bad. They're not bad emotions. Like, I really liked how they handled them, especially since it is overstuffed as a sequel. But again, I feel like if they were to go this route, they could have went much, much deeper and maybe extended it just a little bit. This movie has a 90-minute runtime, and it feels that way, but it also feels weirdly rushed. I don't know if it's that's me or something, but it felt rushed to me. Like, the parents are barely there. They don't get a conversation with Riley. There's not just, the movie's juggling a lot, and it's an odd sort of sequel compared to what I'm used to with Pixar sequels. Cars 2, not a great sequel. So I always kind of put this at, like, okay, what about the other Pixar sequels? Like, Toy Story freaking 6 at this point. But I put it at the sequels that are just, like, at number 2. Like, Monsters University. Obviously, that's a prequel, but it's technically like a continuation. Finding Dory. Incredibles 2 is another good one. And again, when I compare it to those, this is definitely a lesser Pixar sequel, but it's not a bad sequel. It's just very underwhelming and felt very rushed. And I don't know, but there is a standout in this film that I would like to mention, where when they're in the suppressed emotions vault, you get some really cool 2D animation mixed in with the 3D with Pouchy and, I don't know, Boofy the dog or whatever his name was. It's pretty cute and pretty clever, and on top of that, it's like Riley had a crush on like a old video game character, and you see like a nice like pixelization of like that video game. Like, it's cool visually, and it's even it has a few laughs as well. So again, the ideas are there. I just feel like it's a little bit rushed and underwhelming. And even Riley as a character, I feel like despite her having a panic attack, and as realistic as it was, I felt like Riley wasn't, like, I wish she was shown a little bit more prominently. Like, we saw her life a little bit more. And granted, yeah, I get it, like, we saw her in the first movie and, all that. I just feel like, versus just doing a hockey camp, they could have went so much further with it. They could have done another, like, school type of scenario, and she's playing hockey on the side as, like, a sport. And I feel like that would have been a little bit better. but also just more complex emotions, more complex, and just more darker themes. It could have been a really good sequel and a little bit more moving, to the point where, yeah, it is a tearjerker. Now, I've seen a lot of people say, like, obviously with the anxiety attack and everything, it really resonated with them. And believe me, the anxiety attack resonated with me as well, because like I said, I've suffered from panic attacks before, so did definitely hit me. And the other message that kind of hit me pretty deep was Joy, at one point, just says, maybe the older that you get, the less happy you feel. I don't know. That was kind of a nice line to me. That's the only line that I kind of really remember from the film. Otherwise, the film isn't bad. Like, I would say, if you're a huge fan of the first movie, go see it. It's not bad for kids either. Like, and I hate saying this, but it's not as politically charged, I guess you could say, as other Disney films. I hate mentioning that because I don't want to be part of that group, but you know, Disney, obviously, if you know Disney's past, they just have a tendency to add certain things in their movies that don't need to be added, or they could be added, but they're just in there way too much to the point where it distracts from the overall film. But not with this film. I feel like this was a nice, just sit down and just entertaining film. I feel like I've given more, like, praises to this film than really dislikes. So, yeah, even though I'm, like, overall mixed, I do want to be clear, just as I wrap this up, that it's not a bad film. It's a good sequel. I just feel like there was a lot more they could have done with it, and also at the same time, I felt like it wasn't really needed. Like, I feel like Pixar movies don't need sequels. Like, they are one-off type of films. And Toy Story, Cars, like all of those, Incredibles, even Finding Nemo, like all those aside, I feel like most of those stories are untouchable. Like, they don't need sequels, they don't need reboots, and Inside Out falls into that camp where it didn't really need a sequel, but I'm glad that we got one. If we do happen to get a third movie, which does seem more likely, all I hope for is just a more mature story and kind of like round out Riley as a character as she moves on from adulthood. I don't know, just something like that. But otherwise, it's not a terrible movie. Go see it if you want to. I saw it with a group of friends. It was pretty fun. We had a fun time. Pretty interesting theater going experience that I will never share, and because I will stay between me and my friends, and we'll just leave it at that. That's about it. See ya.